What's up, guys? It is your girl, Donjia M, and we are back with another episode, of Ask 15 Questions 2, and we are here. I'm super excited about this episode. We are here with the amazing, the outreach ministry, the intelligent, the wonderful. I can go on, Miss Alia Berry. And we are here for Ask 15 Questions to a social worker. Thank you so much for being here and accepting this invitation. How are you?
I am good. I am good. And thank you, love, for inviting me. I appreciate the opportunity to even speak on some of these things that we're going to talk about today. And the questions are awesome. And I'm looking forward to the conversation. So thank you.
Yes, I'm super excited. No need to delay. Y'all know how I get down. We are going to jump right in. So, question number one, tell us about yourself.
Okay. So my name is Alia Berry. Professionally. So I am a licensed social worker here in Newark, New Jersey. I have 20 years experience working with ages 0 to 60 years old. So I've been in a variety of different settings. So I've been in daycares and schools and correctional facilities, shelters, group homes, after school programs, summer camps over the course of the last 20 years. So working with a lot of different people, and we're going to talk about settings today because social workers can be found in like a million different settings. Um, so I have experience with a bunch of different settings. And so right now I'm a full-time consultant. I run my own business called Seeds and Berries. Seedsandberries.com. Check me
Yeah,
out. Check me out.
we're gonna put it.
Yes. And so I do program design, training, and direct clinical services with schools, nonprofits, and government facilities. So I'm a community-based social worker. And so to me, community-based to me is the fact is that social work does not occur 9 to 5. Social work is a lifestyle. It does happen outside the four walls of an agency while still adhering to professional boundaries because that's like a thing, right? Professional and ethical boundaries is a
Yes.
thing. However, social work is not always found in the four walls of an agency. And so for me, what that means, I can be at baby showers and graduations, but I'm also at sentencing hearings and funerals, goal setting on the sidewalk, and hugs at a red light. So to me, community based, that's kind of what it looks like for me.
Wow. What? Just listen, God. Just in number one, mad bombs dropped. What? So okay, I knew the idea of social workers being in so many different facilities, but this idea of a community social worker, I've never heard that term before in my life. I've never heard that. Heard of like the school social worker. I assume that juvenile detention centers, group homes, all of those things, like you have a social worker because there are caseloads of people there, like where people are. But you don't think there are also people a part of the community and you need social workers in this area. And you said 0 to 60 or 16?
60. Yeah, I worked at an early Head Start program in Manhattan early on in
Okay.
my career. So like it was early Head Start. So like the 1, 2, and 3 year olds, early
Mm-hmm.
Head Start.
Yes.
And so then I've also worked in correctional facilities with state populations, and so a lot of them they were finishing 20 or 30 years, and so I was discharging them at 59, and they had finished 20 or 30 years of incarceration. So I've really
Wow.
kind of worked with the lifespan.
And I think that is also very good because when most people I know, for me and for a lot of people that I talk to, when you think of social work, you think of babies to 18
Mm-hmm.
because we hear the term like aging out and all that stuff. So you don't really think of social workers dealing with adults either.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Okay. Question.
We're gonna open the eyes today
Okay.
with Miss
Already.
Berry. We're going.
Question number one. The glasses have come on. I'm ready to learn. Okay. So question number two. You you kind of alluded to it a little bit, but what does a social worker do? You kind of alluded to it, but if you want to, dig a little bit more.
Yeah, so I really had to break this down for myself in preparation for this conversation because it's true what you just said, like that a lot of times like we think about social workers in certain pockets and serving certain people, and like for me, like if this is going to be a social work commercial today, right, I want to be able to expose individuals who may be interested in social work to there are so many places and people that social workers serve. Mm-hmm. And so there's macro, meso, and micro, right? So the macro level social work is found in activism, advocacy, training other people, creating systems. Social workers are creating law.
Wow.
Right? They're creating legislation. They're on the Congress floor down in Trenton, testifying for certain policies be put in place. That's like macro level social work, right? Wow. Everybody has a lane.
Yeah.
And like being at the macro level is a lane. Then there's like meso, kind of in the middle, where you are the director of nonprofits, right? You're leading school settings. Social workers lead school settings, right? Like your leadership and your supervising staff, right? And then micro level is counseling, case management, running group, right? Those things that are direct service, interacting directly with clients. And so that's kind of the micro level. I have kind of done all three and go in and out of all three. With running my business, I've kind of transitioned more to meso and macro. I still do direct clinical service as well. And to be honest, the micro work kind of keeps me high, for lack of a better word. Like it keeps my pulse on the work. It keeps me in the street because I can't not feel the pulse of the people, right? Sometimes you elevate so high that's like you don't continue to feel the pulse. Right. And like I need that. So then some of the settings, I like made a whole list. So schools, right? K to 12, where you can be a school social worker, child study team as a special ed social worker, shelters for women, for families, for men, for children, mentally ill, the homeless, men with AIDS, women with AIDS, children with AIDS, running a private practice as a therapist, all sorts of correctional facilities, whether juvenile, adult, state, county, right? Probation, parole, DCPMP, formerly known as DIFAS, right? Geriatric, the older people, the elderly, they need social workers, and there are social workers that study to serve the geriatric population. Wow. Like those 85-year-olds, like that's not my ministry. but like they need social workers.
Yeah, they
are going through so much.
And they need advocates because people will take advantage. That is very, I never thought about it like that.
Yeah.
That is true.
Advocates and the thoughts about all my friends are dying, right? My time may be coming. Nobody takes me serious and nobody listens to me. During COVID, not being able to see my family. I mean, like geriatric social work is a whole field in itself. Hospice, preparing people for death. Social workers are found there. Mommy and me, oncology, right? You have cancer and you have to cope through cancer, like, right? Substance abuse, disaster relief. After a hurricane hits Katrina in New Orleans, social workers were needed on the ground, right? So like that's not an exhaustive list, but like just so we kind of put this in context that like social workers really are needed and found everywhere.
Literally. And as she said, that's probably only touching the peak of the iceberg. Like we didn't even, wow. And a lot of those areas, I don't think we really think about. We don't really think about. Yeah, we just don't think about it. Like,
But in fairness, it's like who you're exposed to, right? So if you're a teacher, if you're professionally, your career as a teacher, the social workers you've come in contact with are school social workers.
Right, like the child study team.
Yeah. If our grandparents had to have a social worker come in, then we would know they existed. So like in fairness, if you haven't encountered, if you never lived in a shelter or you never saw a therapist in a private practice, and maybe you did at 10, but you didn't know where her letters were, right? Like you didn't know that she was a social worker and not a psychologist or a psychiatrist. Like at 10, I didn't know what she was, you know? So, right? Like, so
Right.
it does matter like what you've encountered. I
Yeah.
think, yeah, that's a good point.
This is very true. And I think this is like the common trend for most of the professionals that I've had thus far. Everyone has ventured into their career because of what they have been exposed to. Like the chiropractor that we talked to, he became a chiropractor because he had to see a chiropractor. He didn't before that, he didn't know about the chiropractor, but he loved, you know, the way he felt after. He was like, this is what I want to do. And most people, you get exposed to those things, and it's just like, you know, most teachers become teachers because you had a great teacher, or
right.
you had a bad teacher, and you want to be a better teacher,
exactly.
right? Like,
that's true. I had a terrible teacher, and I wanted to be a better one.
Yes, yes. So that is like food for thought. Like, you know, you encounter things and allow yourself to be open to explore what you're exposed to, especially in your community. Like that's the first place to kind of like dive in and see where the need is. That's great. And this is only question 2. Jesus. Okay.
We out here, Donjia.
Okay, question number 3. This is the part I really need to know.
Take notes.
What did your schooling consist of?
Yeah. So don't be scared. I have faith. No. So I did get my undergrad in something else, which we'll talk about later. So I was only going to answer this question with the question that it was asking me, which is, what is the schooling required for social work? Yes. So that is, you know, an undergrad. You can get a bachelor's in social work. That would take 4 years, a BSW, right? And then for me, I got my bachelor's in something else, and then I got my master's in social work, and that took 3 years. Not part-time, because like it can be done in 2 if you like go extremely insanely hard and maybe live with your parents and don't have to
okay.
like
nobody
full time. I was grown by the time I got the master's, because I did have a career shift. So no, it wasn't not working full time and like with these 20-year-olds like going for this master's. So it took me 3. It can take up to 4, right? If you go even at a slower pace. But the master's and that's it. I mean, when I saw those PhD students walk across the stage, I was like, and I heard their topics and stuff, I was like, oh, that's dope. Like, but I owe a lot of money, and like PhD is not really like here now. But yeah, so PhD is definitely not required. I also recently, a colleague in the work, she said, and she said this to me personally, and she also has said it out loud, which is, you know, and she's a Black woman, and as sitting at some tables, right, with some old white men that would begin to discredit or dismiss what she had to say based on her credential, which was already a high social work credential, but now she's getting a PhD. And she said in it recently, like, because you're never going to be able to dismiss what comes out of my mouth. Like, she has as much experience as I do. We know what's going on, right? Like, I don't have to necessarily do research to tell you what's going on. But that little credentials at some tables, the higher you go, kind of the higher credentials you need to be respected.
Right.
I'm a little bit experiencing that now too, because I need to go one credential up. But PhD, like I'm not challenged to do that. I haven't experienced what she experienced, but I will just mention that the PhD as a woman at the table, some people were like, well, where's your
make PhD? You look like the boss, basically. Right.
And you can't miss what I'm saying.
Yeah. Do I want to do my tag on question now? I might as well, because I mean it is about schooling.
Okay.
Are there jobs that you can get with okay, so you're going to go into what you got your undergraduate in, but for someone who me who got their undergraduate
No
degree.
names, me. Asking for a friend.
Asking for a friend, Facebook. Um, who got their undergraduate in sociology.
Mm-hmm.
Um, getting into, I see that getting into the field itself is just like, y'all don't want me. So are there jobs that like allow people to like who just have that undergraduate degree to begin to like get their feet wet?
So yes, I mean, because sociology is a related major, right? Now, if you had said, accounting, then like, yeah, you kind of got to start somewhere, right?
Yeah.
But for me, like, and we'll get into this, it was education, was my undergrad, and like that's also somewhat related. So
Right.
like sociology is related. And so your question was, are there jobs that could be ready for me to get my feet wet?
Yeah.
Yeah. So yes, so I worked at Covenant House for 8 years while teaching. That's a spoiler for what my career change was, and I'll get into more detail about that. But I was teaching full time, and I was working at Covenant House over the weekend as just a Saturday night counselor. And when I tell you that thing turned me into a social worker for real, now I had really been a social worker in my heart probably my whole career.
Right.
But Covenant House taught me really how to do that thing, and in a boot camp kind of way. Those young people don't come with files. Okay. You're there Saturday night. My name is Miss Alia. Your name is Jane, right? And like you're in bed number 4. And by the next Saturday, Jane is no longer in that bed. Right. Now Victoria's in that bed or whoever, right? Like, so or Jane may still be in that bed and she may be in that bed for 6 months. So like Covenant House, like all that was required was a diploma.
Wow.
And no, like, was it making like enough to like, no shade to Covenant House, but like hourly just on Saturday nights? No, that wasn't like to pay my bills, but it definitely to talk about dive in and kind of wet your palate. Yes, there are things that you can volunteer or like those kinds of, especially in shelters, group homes, that kind of thing, where you can get your feet wet with any kind of education.
Wow. That's so good to know.
Yeah.
Because I think oftentimes when I think the most discouraging thing for a lot of people in any career is that like, okay, now I have my degree, now what? And then when you go on like the Indeeds and all of these job places, it's like, oh, MSW or masters or this. And then the job that you do see that's like high school diploma is like $4 an hour, and you're like,
Exactly right. Woo, that's a word right there. $4 an hour.
Like I don't. But then it's like, okay, for the more high level experience jobs that want you to have at least a year, 2 years, it's like, okay, where do I get my year? Where do I get my year from? All right, let me start at this $4 an hour joint and like be busting tables somewhere, So I think that is like good to know that. And then I also realized that it's also sometimes who you know.
That's who nepotism goes for.
Okay. Yes. Learn all the people, get to know everybody, because it is, I mean, it's unfortunate, but when you know people, you can that door is kind of like open for you. And, just hopefully you're a great worker, because I'm not gonna lie, I know a lot of people and they're like, I need you to refer me. I'm like,
put your name on them. Facts. That's facts. Yeah.
You always late to work. I'm not doing that. No.
Yeah. But then to your point, like I said, Covenant House, let's just call it $4 an hour, right? I didn't go in there expecting it to pay my bills. Right. Which is why I didn't quit my full-time job to work, right? Like, but that's okay. But it was priceless what it gave me. It was priceless what it gave me. That was a degree nobody could have paid for, my work at Covenant House, right? So like at the end of the day, like those little things you see on Indeed, because you're right, it, especially in social work, it's the more higher credentials that open up the financial doors, which we'll talk about when you ask the difference between LSW.
Which is actually next, but
okay. So go ahead and ask. And then
So question number 4, you can go right into it. What is the difference between an LSW and an MSW?
Yeah, so MSW is a master's of social work.
Okay.
And an LSW you get after you get the master's, and that is the license, and you have to take an exam to be able to get the license. I know that. Don't be scared. I'll give you my book. I'll give you my flashcards. I got you. But it also lasts forever. You don't have to retake exams.
Yeah, because if it didn't, I just.
You don't have to retake the exams, but you renew your license. Same way teachers do. Like you have to do PD, like certificates to maintain the license. And so then the step up from that is an LCSW, which is after you get the L, you get the LCSW, which is the licensed clinical social worker.
Okay.
And so that person did 3,000 hours of supervised work and an exam. And
how many hours?
3,000. It takes like, I think we did the math. It takes like many years, but like that is the credential that I am like considering, because I was always told LCSW, that's what you need to do a private practice. And that's not really the case. Like I said about my colleague earlier, like there are some tables that I want to get to, and I need the LCSW to get to that table. Right. No matter how much experience I have, right? There's LCSWs that don't have nearly as much experience as I do, but those credentials, they go a long way. Like they just do. And so I've done well over 3,000 hours, but they weren't documented, right? So like,
and that's what I was just about to say. I was just about to ask that, like the hour requirement, it has to be documented hours
by a supervisor, which if you don't have which is an LCSW, another LCSW. And so a lot of people, they do like part-time work, or they go seek a job that has a boss, an employer that is the LCSW. So you can kill two birds with one stone, and they'll sign off on your paperwork while you work, right? Because the alternative is paying someone privately. And we did math on that one time in my class, and it was like, it was almost a degree. And I was like, I'm not paying anybody. So like that much, it's like $100 an hour to pay someone to supervise you, to document your hours. So like, yeah.
And the person that supervises you also have to have a LSW.
LCSW.
Oh, they have to have an LCSW in order for the hours.
Yep. Yeah. So
you go ahead and get that. So you can.
And I'll let you know. But and so that's the thing. Like if let's say I was working at a place for $4 an hour, right? I love that example that you gave, because that is true. But let's say I look at a job that's $4 an hour. It's a part-time situation, but it has an LCSW in there. Oh, I'm gonna take that $4 an hour because that's a free LCSW. So a lot of times we as social workers, we weigh, like if I get paid less, but you have a supervisor for my hours, okay, I'll get paid less because let me get document my hours and we're good.
Right.
So yeah.
That's so like it's only the hours that you need for that next
and an exam. There's an exam too. But you're not there yet. We're not there yet.
Golly.
So don't worry about it. No.
Let me tell you something. The Lord will
help you on the exam. Okay.
He gonna have to. He gonna have to take the exam for me, because I'm gonna be passed out.
He will. The Holy Ghost is gonna click A, C, D, B.
Oh, it's on the computer.
Prep courses. There's books. Right? There's study groups, there's stuff like that. There's little strategies on to, like I said, go to the bathroom, come back. Like they tell you do that every 45 minutes, like go to the bathroom. If you don't have to go to the bathroom, still take a walk.
Yeah.
Like, and you know, and it's all right. But you can do masters. This is the thing though, like you can do MSW for a while. Like I did just my master's and I worked and I did that thing for a while. You can be a school social worker with an MSW. But once I got into it, I soon realized that L was necessary. But I didn't get the L for a couple years. I worked with just the M for a couple years, and then I was like, okay, let me go do this because it's necessary.
Wow.
Yeah. So no rush. for the exam, girl. It's okay.
You see, my bun got loose. Everything.
You're trying to get a little hot. Like,
fixing my collar.
yeah, it's all good. It's all
good. But yeah, okay. Question number 5. How is your work schedule?
So my work schedule, and real quick, on number 4, the last piece is money though, right?
Oh, okay.
So LSW, LCSW, the higher you go in credentials, the more money you make. Just putting that out there.
Yeah.
Right? So number 5, and social workers don't make a lot of money, which is why it drives you up to go seek out those other credentials, because otherwise, like, am I able to pay my bills? Like, yeah. So, so my work schedule. So because I am an entrepreneur and doing consulting work, it is very, very fluid and flexible. And I like, some of my work is project based. So it's like, hey, Alia Berry, we're hiring you to do this project and we need it in 30 days. And so then I have the flexibility to work on the project whenever I want to and get it to them in 30 days. And then there's like some other ones, like some of my other clients that's like, I work with them from like 1 to 4 o'clock on Mondays and Fridays. So they put their meetings in those time blocks. So I have scheduled meetings along the week with different clients. And then it's like, and then I also do training and like PD. So like I just trained all the social workers and guidance counselors in Newark Public Schools and in like peer mediation. And so like they gave me 4 dates. So it's like, hey, here's your date. You'll be talking to all high school social workers in the district. There's your date. And so then I just prepare for that date. So right now, consulting and entrepreneurship is very flexible and fluid. So yeah.
That is good. Wow. But your schedule wasn't always like that.
No, it was not, ma'am.
Yeah.
No, it was not. Like,
so tell us about the
yeah.
before this glory.
Yeah. So like I've been I kind of did like a leap of faith and left my job on my this former job. This isn't the shift we'll talk about later, but like my last job, I left with a leap of faith on excellent terms. Like cried while giving them my resignation letter, such excellent terms. Like they cried. Like, so, that was last July. So like I've only been doing this for 18 months as full-time consulting. So yes, my whole rest of the 20 years I was in a job, right? With an employer, 9 to 5, 8 to 4 at schools, right? Summer camp is like a 9 to 5 in the heat, right? After school programs, like when I was in college, I was going to school, right? But then I was doing after school programs from 3 to 6. Right. I work now part-time in the evening in a correctional facility. So I work there like from 4 to 8:30 because that's when I can and they accept that. And then Covenant House, I was working Saturday nights. So like I would bring Covenant House youth to church on Sundays. So that was like a more, I just said a whole bunch of different settings. I would also say like group home. Because I was a teacher prior to the group home, there are no snow days at a group home.
Okay.
Okay. So we talk about schedule. That took some adjustments. Okay. Because digging myself out with the car and like sliding and blizzards to get to that house, right? That was only 10 minutes from my house, but it took 30.
I was going to say in the snowstorm, it's about 30, 40.
Right, exactly. Or like, in Sandy, like they were stuck in the Covenant House, like the staff during Sandy, like not the whole 14 days or whatever.
Yeah.
But so sometimes you also get stuck in a place. And so we talk about schedule, right? I've been stuck in the correctional facility when a code goes off and they won't let me out because there's no movement. Staff can't walk around when there's a code going on. So
that's the moment you go, am I still being...
Hello, I get off at 8:30.
Am I still being paid for this?
No, ma'am. No, ma'am. No, ma'am.
Like you off the clock, 8:30, but it's a code, so you gotta...
Yeah. And so like, but my schedule was 8:30 p.m. Right. And now I'm leaving at 9:15, 9:30. So, schedules depending on the setting you're working in. Like if you're working in a setting that has crises, then you can't commit to a schedule sometimes. So it's not as predictable as school, that's for sure. Like dismissal time, although teachers do a ton of work at home, so your schedule is still all weekend, you're grading papers and whatnot,
Okay.
but you still get off at 3 and school ends June 19th, right? Like it's a little more predictable than
Yeah.
sometimes.
I mean, last year it ended up becoming very unpredictable for all of the
Definitely.
teachers out there. I constructed myself to be like, I'm leaving work at work, and when I get home, that's it. And then COVID happened. It was like, now you're bringing work at home.
Now you're on no choice.
And now you ain't got no choice.
Glasses on the dining room table. Let's go.
I said, oh, okay. So yeah, it took some adjusting, but I can only imagine because I've seen like social workers work on weekends and especially like with PMP, yes, PMP dropping children off and all that other stuff. Because for a very long time, my mom and we have been an emergency home, so we've gotten calls like, "Hey, can we drop? We just had something that happened, and we like it's Sunday night. What is happening?" So yeah, that is also something that I thought about. That I'm kind of like,
yeah, no, and it takes boundaries because like when I say community based, right, and I'm in the baby showers and the graduations, but like, I'm also like crisis interventionist, mentor, right? I've talked people out of suicide at midnight, right? Young people, like in the inbox or on FaceTime or like, I won't get into too much detail or whatever, but like community based too when you're on God's clock, right? And so
that's what it boils down to. Like it's a ministry. The ministry
is,
really doesn't really stop.
but boundaries are important, and we're going to
Yes.
talk about that later because boundaries and self-care are critical. So we'll get into that later.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. Question number.
The schedule, it depends on the setting is the short answer to that.
Yes, depending on where you are. Okay, question number 6. Was this the career you always wanted to go into?
So as we've already kind of alluded to, so no. I was I went to Temple University for my bachelor's, and I basically senior year in high school, like had an experience that led me to want to be a teacher. And so I went to Temple to be a teacher, elementary, so I got certified. Like I have a bachelor's in education, certified K to 5, I think, and special ed K to 12. And so, I'm working through school. That's how I have the 20 years. Because some people are like, she's not old enough to have 20 years. That's because I've been doing this since I was 17. I'm 36 now, right? About to be 37. And so, yeah, like I wanted to be a teacher. That's what I thought I wanted to do. You mentioned the praxis earlier, right? I did my student teaching and all that, and I enjoyed teaching. I did enjoy teaching. But as I got into the formal setting of teaching, which was in Philly very briefly for like 6 months, and then I came home to Jersey and taught here in Newark, it was like, I don't know. I was a very like untraditional teacher. So like I was definitely writing my own social, like you just mentioned the Holocaust earlier, but like I wrote 12 months of Black history curriculum and never touched those textbooks they gave me, right? Like I was teaching Trayvon Martin and the Revolutionary Unit, right? Like I was doing kind of my own thing and like, but still standard based and the stuff is on the wall, right? But at the same time, I was a special ed teacher. And like, honestly, like principals, they don't care what you're doing. Like they don't. Like as long as you're not nobody's throwing chairs. I'm up on the 3rd floor, right? Like
kids are alive.
Exactly. So like I also, wasn't always so bound to like things that I didn't think were like edifying the young people in like a social way. And I'm also an activist, so like I would bring that kind of into the classroom. And so I was at a particular school in Newark and doing special ed, self-contained, 6th to 8th grade, and they closed the school during the Cami Anderson reign regime, I should say. And they closed the school, and I was like, okay, so time to go find another school. And so I go to a behavior school in Newark that was like a tier 3 behavior school. It was called Berliner, and it was for young people who were just short of going out of district. So like they couldn't be in like BD classes, you know, in elementary school, but they needed a self-contained school. And so I taught 8th grade there. And I said, they'll never close Berliner, right? Like these kids, what are they going to do with these kids, right? They'll never close Berliner. And then they closed Berliner that next year. And so me and God, we went through like a whole thing, and I won't get into super detail about like all that. But that year, I also had a student from the year before that was killed. And so he was 15. His name was Raheem, and you know that his death really you know made me realize that my life nor those who I serve's life is promised, and like this is not promised. The next day is not promised. And I had been procrastinating. Like I had already been thinking about social work, especially by the time I got to Berliner, because like you're throwing this desk because your mother is selling her body for drugs.
Wow.
You don't care about page 12, like Y equals MX plus B. And I kind of don't either. And so like it became more of a pull on me, because it was more like these young people really need something else, another part of me than this instructional academic experience. And then when Raheem died, it was like I should have been his social worker.
Wow.
But I was his teacher. And so that really pushed me into getting the master's. But that was like many, many years later after the bachelor's. And when I got the news Berliner closed, it was like a whole thing between me and God. Like it was what was the thing to get me out of the classroom. And we argued about it, and I applied for jobs, and I did apply for jobs, and I was hired on the spot for 4 different like BD positions in the district. Oh, that's Berry from Berliner. Like I was successful there. I was well known at that point. Oh, that's Berry from Berliner. Like, yeah. And I went to those interviews, but regardless of what God was talking about, and I'm like, well, I'll look.
Right? I'm going to what I know.
And he convicted me so bad, girl.
Wow.
Like, and I remember the day I wrote the email to all 4 schools, like I declined these jobs, and I left the district with nothing lined up except summer camp. Like that's a faith plunge for real. And I left, and I did summer camp. I was unemployed September. October, I applied for a group home and transitioned into full-time social work and took a $15,000 pay cut. Facts, right? Like, yeah, that was a part of it. But like that group home turned me into full-time social worker, case manager. And I was there for 2 years. And ever since then, like, you know, full-time social worker. But definitely a teacher. And what you said earlier was you'll always be a teacher. Like I'll always be a teacher. I'm just teaching different stuff. So like my group is charismatic. I bring clips in. I call it a hook. I write curriculum, right? That's because I was a teacher, and that makes me somewhat like marketable. And the experience for my clients is exactly what it was for my young people that I taught special ed. So, yeah.
Wow.
So we don't want something loud to happen to shift. Let's just be obedient in the first place.
But the crazy thing,
2 years in a row. I was the only teacher in a closing school 2 years in a row. Yeah, me, Alia Berry, the only one, because Berliner was the only one that closed that year, and Burnett had closed the year before. Like really? Like okay.
So, it's like all right, hello.
Okay, hear you, got it.
And that is so true though, God, and it's sad to think about. Forgive us, Father, but He really does sometimes, because it's just like we pray. He's like, okay, well, all right,
maybe like wait, not like that though.
And then we pray hard, and He's like, oh gosh, okay, shut the building down. I don't know what else you want me to do. Meanwhile, we still applying for teaching jobs.
Right. But I really felt like I really felt like I was leading my son to the mountain, like to leave the classroom. Like you want my firstborn child. Like I really did feel like that. Like I was so attached to teaching, but like that was clearly not the purpose of my life. You know, that's not
Yeah.
my life.
And if it was just the, like you said, the foundational piece to get you those things that you now implement in the space and the field that you are in,
Yep.
God will use
Yep.
that. But the problem is that we just stay there longer than we need to. And that is not just in careers, people. That is in every facet of life.
What?
We don't understand those seasonal things, and we
Yes.
try to make them lifetime things. And God is like, no,
Yes.
that is not it. I tell for some people it's frustration. People know that they need to transition because now I'm frustrated. Now I feel like, this thing, but we still ignore it, for complacency or comfortability or whatever it is. But it is tough. Like, and I'm honest with God. I just be like, listen, I be needing to know.
Right.
He's like, but I make faith moves, and I tell other people to make faith moves all of the time.
Yeah.
When it comes to this shorty right here, I'll be like, all right.
Taking our own advice, girl. But
I
it's
do
true.
not.
And I don't want him to have to get loud with me anymore, right? Like I'm 36 now, right? That was already quite some time ago. Like I don't need you to get loud with me. Cause you're right. It's in professions, it's in relationships, it's in neighborhoods you live in. I mean, it's time to go, right?
Okay.
It's time to move on.
He doesn't.
I don't need him to get loud with me though, because I'm good on that. We've done that dance, okay? All right. All
But
right.
the good thing is that you learned, right? And it
Yes.
doesn't have to keep happening.
Mhm.
Oh man. Okay, question number 7. How does your family feel about you being a social worker?
Yeah. So this one, so like I won't say obviously, but like they do definitely love and respect my work. Um, they support my work. They, have heard many stories over the years, like confidential stories, but like, I think that they get access to information, again, not confidential information, but like the things that I see with my own eyes, right? Like there are still things that no one on the earth knows I saw.
Right.
Right. There are things that I've heard in counseling sessions that make my toes curl that I will never, ever tell anyone. Right. So I have a lot of stuff in my head that nobody will ever know.
And we're gonna go, that's actually like the next question. So we're
Yeah.
gonna go into
Yeah, because but like so they, they are very supportive, but they also get a lot of access to settings that they might not if they didn't have a daughter or sister, in social work. And I would also say that if you were to ask them, I'm sure that they would also say it's probably scary because I am a street social worker. So my main kind of passion and focus is on gang affiliated and or violent offenders. And that is in the community as well as incarcerated, juvenile and adult. So I'm a street social worker, right? And some of the places I've been, near death experiences, like that happens, and like so I don't tell them things that would be scary.
Okay, because if your family like mine, they trying to put pause.
But I think that they know that that's
Mm.
the case. And so like if you were to ask them like how is it with her being a social worker, because they know the work I do, I think they might also say sometimes it's scary. But they also know that like they should know by now I have angels dispatched to my life. And like
Okay.
yes, I've been, like I've talked to a young person that has money on his head by 3 different hoods, and I do counseling outside for 45 minutes. But
Like
I'm not dead.
outside on the
Yeah,
street.
on the street. Yeah, on the sidewalk. I've done counseling on Broad Market. Like I've done, carjackers hug me through my window.
And then now y'all see
I
why I
love
said
it.
outreach, why I introduced her as outreach ministry
Yeah,
in the
because we're gonna get
beginning.
into because like that focus of my work like did come from a place, but like yeah, that's what I'm doing. So yeah, but I'm alive like now, and like I do believe that's because it's just not my time yet, and like and I've had to reconcile with that, right? Like if I die doing this work, then that's just what happened,
And
right?
then
And
it was in God's plan,
need
yeah.
everyone to be sure that my mission was accomplished, that I was saved, right? Like, I don't know if this video, like, if whatever time I die, we can watch this, like, I was saved, and like, my mission was accomplished, and I have never feared death. Um, but I do fear hurting all the people I'm connected to, because
Mm.
I'm connected, like, I still mentor kids from 10 years ago.
Wow.
Like, I'm connected to hundreds of teenagers, young adults, former inmates, right? Like, if it come up on RLS that Miss Berry died, that, like, is standing room only. And I tell people it's gonna be ops, like, right, enemies. People might not, the audience may not know, but like street enemies, like, I need you to leave the gun outside, right? Like, but there's also like people from the suburbs, and people, like, there's gonna be so many different kinds of people. But anyway, I say all that to say that, like, I go with God, and I'm alive, and so I'm not dumb either.
Okay.
Be clear, like, I do know the streets very well, and I also let the Holy Ghost lead me. So, like, to make certain decisions. So I go with my gut, and I don't walk into dangerous situations. Like, I do know the streets very well, and so I don't walk into dangerous situations. But you know, but
Right.
so I would
And
say,
this is what God has called her to.
yeah,
So
right. Let's not
that's,
all.
don't just be out here like, you know what? I'm inspired. I'm going to be a street.
I'm
Mm-mm.
gonna
Pray
go
about that
sit in
thing.
the trap, because that lady in Donjia's interview.
Go on, pray about it. You ain't fitting to use this video to get all cut up.
Disclaimer at the bottom: do not try this at home.
Okay. I'm going to put that. Do not try any of this at home. Pray first.
Word.
Yeah. So yeah, that is great that your family feels that way, because I know, which I think we actually get into, so you don't have to get into it. But one of the reasons why this question is often asked for a lot of our like professionals or anyone, just about how the family feels, because our family is directly connected. And I know sometimes like social work can have like a, you know, I've heard of like negative um, kind of ideas to it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I've heard people say like, "Oh no, social workers only break up families," like, or don't get into that field. Like I've been told that, like, don't do that because they
Well,
don't
social
help
workers
families.
also hug carjackers. How about that? They gonna be like, what? Definitely don't be no social worker. They gonna be like, that
Yeah.
this girl on here hugging carjackers.
Yeah, but I think that that's great though, that your family, and then I think it helps to also be able to like communicate with your family, like you said, like being honest, being able to have that safe space. Even I'm pretty sure, like you said, you've been in counseling sessions with people that made your like toes curl. You heard things. I'm pretty sure you said things to them that they were clutching their pearls, but they
I'm
ain't.
sure too. You're right about that. But you're right, because they're so supportive, and
Yeah,
to have supportive circle, my family, my friends, like, to have a supportive circle is extremely important, and
yeah,
life, that's my lifeline. So yeah.
yeah. So that's really good. Okay, I am so excited about question number 8. Question number 8: is it easy for you to separate work from personal?
Right. So, being that, like, we kind of already addressed, like, that social work is a lifestyle, then it's like, okay, well, so does social work come in and out of everyday life? And like, when that kid hits me up on the inbox, with suicidal thoughts or whatever, like, I'm not setting a boundary on something as serious as that, but boundaries do have to be set. And like, there's, social work school will teach you all about that, but like, I am pretty good at boundaries. I am pretty good at boundaries, and there's a lot of people that aren't. So I am grateful that, like, nobody has to teach me that, or I have to learn it the hard way, because I probably would have been burnt out so long ago. Like, I'm 20 years in, and the amount of energy I feel, especially doing the work I do and the population I serve, like, the fact that I'm not burnt out is because I am good with boundaries. And when I left Covenant House, because that season had ended also on very good terms, but the season had ended, I then weekends are for self care. Weekends are for going out to eat and going to
Mm-hmm.
movies and whatever. Like weekends are for self care. Self care can be free. This is a whole nother thing, but like self care doesn't have to be the spa, right? Like it can be the park that's for free. Um, so yes, I am good at separating professional and personal. But I also would say that vicarious or secondary trauma is a thing, right? And that is for providers.
Talk,
That's for
talk. I was
you
about to
too.
say, talk to us about those
Exactly.
terms.
Because that's for you too, like frontline workers, right? Those of us, you included, on the front lines of the community and the pain and trauma that the community endures. And now we have our own trauma, right? As human beings, like we went through stuff ourselves, right? But when you come into the front lines, um, and you are helping people to cope, you're hearing graphic stories, you are hearing traumatic content and material, for me, all day, every day. All day, every day. Like some of the things that I've heard, and not every once in a while, right? Like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, right? And now I'm gonna exaggerate, but I'm gonna exaggerate a little bit on purpose. Like 5 days a week, I could hear a story about somebody getting shot in the head and brains and blood being on the sidewalk right next to you,
Right.
right? I could hear something at that level 5 days a week. So what ends up happening is vicarious and secondary trauma is when you hear so much traumatic content, you begin to kind of take it in. And especially as empaths, right? Like when we're so
Mm-hmm.
empathetic and you actually literally feel the person while they're telling the story. And I have a very good imagination, so I can literally visualize what they're talking about. And so it's like I was there. And not just me, like this is a term. I did not make up this term.
Right.
It's a scientific term, but like, we can be traumatized by the trauma of those we serve, in addition to our own. And so, with that being said, I continue to work on that. Like, I'm good at self care and boundaries, but the vicarious trauma can be heavy sometimes. And so, I'm continuing to work on that, like, whether it be journaling just to get it off my mind. Like, I need to write that down, no names or nothing in case somebody finds
Right.
it. But like, I need to write that down and I need to put it on the paper and close that book. Um, you know, so like I'm still working on that. I'll be honest and transparent because some of that stuff is really heavy.
Yeah. And do you make sure there's any, I don't think no, it's not a question. But would you recommend excuse me, people who are in the social work field to get a counselor?
I already knew what you was heading for, and I put that in one of the other answers.
Okay.
Yes. Yes. Because that was on the 15th question. It's like, what would I recommend for people who want to get into the field?
Yeah.
Every counselor needs a counselor. So yes.
Yeah.
That is definitely.
Don't tell too much if you're gonna give us more than 15.
No, that was it. Just
Okay.
seek supervision. And the thing about consulting is I don't really have a supervisor, right? The last year and a half. Now I have a lot of really dope mentors. The mentors in my life are beasts, like giants in the work, right? So I have awesome mentors. So always seek supervision and mentoring. But yes, counselors need counselors. Definitely.
You heard it here first. You heard it here first, people. Everybody needs a counselor.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay, question number 9. What inspired you? I felt like this probably should have came earlier, and I wouldn't have felt so attacked. No, I'm just like. Question number 9. What inspired you to become a social worker? I think you kind of
a little bit, but when I was thinking about it, because then I was thinking, yes, Raheem, like the death of Raheem definitely was my why. And when I was getting my master's and I felt like quitting because working full time and getting a master's was hard, right? Like when my eyes felt like they were about to pop out of my head, like Raheem was my why. That is what kept me going. Like, this is not a cute, funny, let me just do this to be cute. Like, he's dead. right? You can do one more paper and one more hour of and a bagel and tea for dinner for a year, right? Like you can do this because like he died for this, right? Like so that was definitely my why. But early on, so like, you know, Miss Berry hasn't always been saved. Surprise, right? And so in my younger
you didn't
years,
come out the womb like that? It's like no.
and so like I thought about this question because I was like, you know, back in the day when I was a young adult, I had a very close friend who was gang affiliated and was shot. And you know, I was exposed to gang, you know, warfare. I was exposed to the gang lifestyle. But at that time, and like that was 20, maybe 19, 18 years ago, right? And although I was still going for teaching, right? Like teaching, I was still being exposed in my private time, right? As a young person, right? Having, you know, right? But I was being exposed to that lifestyle and I was learning things that I was like, yeah, that's not right, right? Or that right there, I see how that love is set up, right? I see where this camaraderie comes from. Like I was understanding these things at that time, but I was just trying to be a teacher. I do think that like me reflecting on this question tonight was that experience and that season, I do think planted the seed in the population.
Oh,
Because
definitely.
I haven't always served gang affiliated and violent offenders. That's probably been the last 8 or 10 years. But I think that planted the seed that then grew
Oh yeah,
more
definitely.
recently. Yeah.
Definitely. Wow. Definitely. I totally agree.
And it was here.
God doesn't
And it was
do.
here. And so even I wrote a status about this the other day that like I got a donation of some bus cards, right? A donor was like, hey, I have this extra transportation money, bus cards, can you find a home for them? I found some homes with local organizations, right? And they got it to people who were really trying hard. And I had to drop a card off in the community. So I get off work kind of late, a little late at night, 9 o'clock, and I drive to a particular neighborhood where I used to be at that time. And just being, and I've been to that neighborhood a million times since, but it was this night, me dropping off a bus card at night on that block, which we're not going to shout out no blocks, right?
No block.
But like me being on that block at that time, like giving a bus card, like I had no idea at 19 years old that I would be there that many years later doing that kind of work. Like I had no idea, but like God does know, and even when we're outside His will, He's still
Okay. He makes it all work together for His good.
All work together for His good, Donjia.
Ain't nobody getting no glory. That's what I be telling people. Y'all be out here trying to flex. Only God needs to be flexing out here. He used it all of it, all trauma, all past experiences. All of it is for the kingdom and what you are supposed to be doing. Absolutely. And 9 times out of 10, it's mostly the thing that you don't want to do. And I've said that before in this episode. So
he getting his glory out of this episode. Go ahead.
Okay. All right. I'm telling you, it's the thing that you don't want to do that He will be like
comfort zone.
Okay.
Time to leave the comfort zone.
Yes. Okay. Question number 10. We're 5 questions away from being done. Question number 10. What are some common misconceptions about your field?
So, and I wanted to drill down a little bit, not necessarily the field. I think we've already discussed misconceptions about the field because the only thing that social workers do is not take kids. Right. We're going to get to my opinion on that part specifically, but like in this interview so far, like we've seen a lot of things a social worker can do. Like I'm a whole consultant. I create forms, right? When I'm doing program design, I'm creating forms and I'm a social worker, but I know what those forms are supposed to say. Right. To collect data, how many reentry guys need their license restored and doing spreadsheets and driving employment goals and, 6 points. Do they have their 6 points? Social security card. Like I'm a social worker, but I'm doing spreadsheets and forms sometimes.
Right.
But I'm an LSW, right? So like, I think that's the misconception about the field. But I would also just, and I can go on this topic for a while, so we just gonna leave it here, about the misconception about violent offenders, right? Because that is something I'm very passionate about. And so, there are a lot of assumptions being made about them as a group in our community, and there's a lot of judgment going forth about them, and it's very disturbing and like hurtful to me because I do serve them intimately, and like I see behind their eyes, right? I hear about the conditions that drove them to the decisions they made or made or continue to make, right? But there are so many conditions that it is not black and white. Oh, the parents. Like I'll read RLS and they'll be like, where's the parents? There's excellent parents and their kids are still outside, right? Like it's not always just the parents, like, and we're not going to get into all the conditions obviously, but like there are so many complex conditions that drive folks' decisions. And so we judge them based on their actions. And then when they burn down the village to feel its warmth, then that's an issue, right? And I'm not saying it's not an issue, because it is. And the misconception about social workers that work with offenders is that we're hugging them to death, right? Figuratively, right? Some of them literally, like talking about daggers at my window, but like, that we're hugging them to death and we're like, oh, it's okay, you have conditions, like it's okay, you have trauma, it's okay, you were a victim. And I say all that is all true. They are victims of trauma. They have a lot of trauma, right? But that doesn't mean I'm also not holding them accountable. And I think that's a misconception about social workers that work with offenders is, well, it's either accountability or therapy and through their conditions. You can do both, which is, I understand that these conditions drove your decision, but we don't like when you shoot up equipment at dismissal time.
Okay.
Right? We don't like it. We don't like that. And I go off in the correctional facility that I work at, right? And I've been there 6 years in group. I'll speak on that because I know the community can't. The community doesn't have access to them like I do, right? So I go in there and I speak on behalf of the community all the time. We don't like when you shoot up Broad Market at 9 a.m. and that blood is still on the sidewalk the next morning, right? Like, and you're traumatizing us. And I understand that you were traumatized, right? And I understand that, and we're gonna heal. Let's do the healing work that you need.
We can break the cycle.
Word. And the criminal thought pattern is like a whole thing that I do therapy. Like I have to do intensive therapy to rewire some of the criminal thought pattern. But like I hold them accountable too. And like I beat them with love and a smile, right? But like
chastisement is love. Listen, exactly. That's the word.
Exactly. And so like I hold them accountable as well, but it is our friends and family killing our friends and family. So let's also the misconceptions about offenders, that they belong to somebody else, that you're not cooking them dinner at night, you're not doing their hair, they're not your boyfriend. No, they're your boyfriend, sis. And he just did that and came home to you. Yeah. Right? Like what he's into, right? Or your son or daughter. And it's very complicated though. It's very complicated because how do you support a parent who has a son who that's a whole nother kind of episode, right? Like, so I support but the fact is they're not coming from outside our community. They are within our community and we're killing each other. So it's time to seek to understand them, say good morning to them,
don't clutch your purse.
Exactly. Build relationship, right? And sometimes they need to have conversation with the community because sometimes they also don't get it. Like, so I've heard a carjacker say, but I ain't hurt her, Miss Berry. I just took her car. Like, but you didn't hurt her? She had nightmares for years after that. She can't sit at a red light without having a panic attack. Like, you didn't hurt. Of course you hurt her. Right. So sometimes they don't even understand that
the trauma.
Yeah, and how they're traumatizing us and how their actions are really impacting their victims. So like the community needs to tell them that. And they also need to share their trauma and conditions so the community better understands them. So again, that's my passion right there. So I could go on forever about that. But that is
Yeah, and I think it's just about educating, right? Like dispelling this misconception that all black boys are thugs. And getting again to the root cause to be able to service the whole man. And I'm speaking from a place of having a little cousin who was out there in the streets and was shot by a detective and died. You know, so I know what it's like to hear an officer say, oh yeah, well, he was a thug. He had a gun on him. But did you see the gun? No, but they told me. Oh, okay. Okay. All right. So that's the thing. This is what we're doing. However, I also, to my little cousin, when he was alive, told him, you are choosing this life. And I can't protect you from what happens from this. God has given you so many. Oh gosh, if I off camera, I will tell you of the favor of God just on his life and how God shielded him and protected him for years from stuff. And I'm like, listen, as I love you dearly and it will hurt. But I know if you continuously choose this path, that what your demise is going to be. That was my truth. Like, and he came from God-fearing family, but he had trauma too. You know, he had a mom who, you know, was on drugs and a grandmother that had to raise him. And mom got better, but grandma still was raising him. Didn't know who his dad was, didn't know. And that's not an excuse. And I would tell him that frequently. Like, I understand it. I get it. And I say that to my students. I understand it. I get it. But we can't allow our trauma to traumatize other people. There are better ways to deal with this than going for a joyride in somebody's car.
Right. And go get healing. And I would also say it's like a continuum in the journey of transformation, right? So like I've worked with like the 13-year-olds that like are just getting a taste of it for the first time, the streets, right? And they like, yeah, I'm good out here. Like, this is great.
Right? Street cred.
And then you have like the 16, 17-year-old who gets deeper, right? Who then like is like stealing the nurse's car or whatnot, right? And they're just deeper and they are enjoying it, right? And but it's getting darker. And then like then I also have worked with state guys who are finishing state bids and then coming home for reentry. So I worked with them at the end of their state bids inside, and their minds are, I mean, a lot of them are so different than the 16 and 13-year-old, right? Because they have insight, they have hindsight now, right? Like they have a wisdom about them, and they have now served time in prison, and like now they're much more clear-headed about how like that street life is not what it is. It's not what it promised me.
Yeah.
It promised
and
me.
I don't know if you guys have this already, but are there programs where like those guys can talk to like the newbies of the okay.
Yeah, so that's what I run groups twice a week in there. And so yeah, that's what I've been doing 6 years, like running groups and case management and discharge planning. So like making sure that they have a plan in place for when they come home, because that reentry period is like the hardest period. Getting yourself on your feet. And like that takes about 18 months for somebody.
Wow.
Yeah, like not just getting a job, but like adjusting and
back to life,
family dynamics, and like reentry is like a whole kind of another thing. But I would say the journey of transformation, there's steps to it. And sometimes when you meet someone early in the journey, this is what you're choosing, and they're like, yeah, I know, and it's serving me well right now. And that thing is hard when you know where it could lead. It's really hard with people that you love.
Yeah, definitely is. Wow. And you heard it. It's as simple as like, we're not telling you to go to your neighborhood drug dealer and to give him a hug, but say good morning. You know what I'm saying? Like that may not be your ministry. Now, if God leads you to go outside and give somebody a hug. Now, I've been riding around the streets telling people pull their pants up. And I'm like, God, why you gotta be talking to these people? They're looking at me like, who is this woman? But they pull me, they pull their pants up. So I guess
But
it was
God does lead you, right? Because when you see the drug dealer outside your house, when you see his eyes, you look at his face, you know his name, right? That's community, because we have rejected him. We have rejected him. And I'll even go as far to say that you know, if as a community and the community has rejected me so much, I don't even see your face when I carjack you, because this is not my community. Y'all don't care about me. So I didn't pistol whip you. I didn't hurt you, but I took it because, you know what I mean? Like, there's a lot of like thought patterns that go into that. And when we don't say good morning and we don't show them the humanity that they do deserve, it draws us further apart. And then that gap between us and them, some of those RLS comments really have drawn me to tears before. Like, us and them, and they could all burn and go under the jail. And like, you know, like, there was an article the other day about somebody jumping off the second floor of a correctional facility. Wow. Like, he attempted suicide, and the comments were like, so he thought he could fly, and an officer must have pushed him, and you know, he had an R. Kelly moment. He thought he could fly. I'm like, if you only knew the pain, and during COVID at that, right? If you only knew the pain and mental health that drove him to jump off that thing. But like, it's us and them, us and them, us and them. And
it's not the reality. I was going to say, like, they are us.
Yeah, there are cousins, brothers, uncles.
If people only knew how far or how close they would be to being them.
Right.
How close and how like it doesn't take that much. Like, and I feel the same way like about homeless people. Mm-hmm. Like, I tell people like all the time, like, take an opportunity, sit down and talk to some of these people. You'll be surprised of the careers and the paths that they had, like degrees that they got above your head. Like, these are not people that are bums and that's just lazy and that made, you know what I'm saying? Like, these are people with stories. Like, there have been times where I told people, like, I may give you money, but what I want you to do is, when we could, before COVID, I want you to come in this restaurant and eat with me. And I would sit with them and have meals with them. Like, but nobody's taken, I've had so many people say to me, nobody has ever sat down and asked me questions. I guess this is how Ask 15 Questions came about, right? But like, in the stories you hear, like stockbrokers, lawyers, a woman who was a teacher, like, and being in that position myself, I'm like, yo, I'm really not that far from being them.
Yeah.
Right. So it's not really that. Like, every time we see a person on the street, every time we see someone that is less fortunate than us or that's chosen a different lifestyle than us, we should always picture our face, and then we'll treat humanity better.
Right.
We'll be able to treat people better. Like, it's not like, oh, this thug but you know, all this other stuff. You know, I got street cred with my boys in my school because they see I live on a number block. So they feel like, like, I'll take it, whatever. They be like, don't mess with Miss Wilson. You live on a number block.
Yeah, right.
I'm like, okay, yeah, whatever. Don't mess with me then.
But you know what? It's true though that we also have our own trauma. And so I can hear some of the audience saying, like, but if somebody like him killed my brother or shot my grandmother on the way to the store, then no, that is them. And I don't want to talk to them. If somebody molested a baby, I don't want to talk to them. Right. And I do get that also. Right. So I'm not even dismissing, like, go hug on people that harm us, but let's hold them accountable. Right. But that takes relationship. So if you want to hold them accountable, form relationship and then tell them that they are doing wrong.
Right.
I tell them all the time, but they know I'm telling it in love. I'm like, y'all doing too much. That's not okay. We don't like that. And they like, all right, Miss Berry, like, because I'm coming in love. So
you've built relationship with them already. And I'm pretty sure that didn't start.
Exactly. And I've had young people that were murdered, and I always feared knowing the shooter. which has never happened to me thus far because we don't like to solve murders. So I don't know who shot them, but like I could understand, like, could I love on the shooter that killed someone I love? That's a stretch. Like, it definitely is a stretch. So like, I just want the audience to know that, like, yes, that's a stretch. Yeah, it's not cool because they are harming us. But
Yeah.
that they and us, like, it only perpetuates the problem, and
Even
then the
bigger.
problem gets worse. So
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, we're gonna definitely move on
yes,
to the next part.
because me
But
and you could just chop it up, Diane. We just chopping it
I
up.
mean, listen, they know that this is a forum, I mean, where it ends up I believe questions are conversation starters anyway, and it should be like that. Like, this is not a job interview. This is not, this is for us to gain information, to gain insight into the persons that are in these professions, and to dispel a lot of things that we don't know in information. So you sharing this information about the population that you service, someone watching this may think twice when they see somebody crossing the street and letting that person cross and not in their head. It may not be a good morning, like, it may just be.
Can we get a nod though?
You know what I'm saying? Like, nod me up, let them know.
Baby steps, baby steps.
Right. Like, and just being able to let people know that you are there for them, that feels great. And at the same time, we're not telling you to not feel a certain type of way about your family member's killer or mugger or rapist or whatever. That is also trauma, and it does take time. It took me a while to be able to get to the point, and this is just me, being a believer and having this thing in myself saying that I can't give that much power to people, and that is just something that God has done for me. So I stopped saying a detective killed my little cousin. I would say a detective shot my little cousin. But God is the one that allowed him to conspire. Because if God didn't want him to die, the detective could have shot him wherever he wanted to shoot him, and God would allow him to live. But God knew of his timing, not to be preaching. But that was for me, and that was healing for me. And that is how God allowed forgiveness to come into my heart. That, all right, I can't say that God is all knowing, God is all powerful, and that when my little cousin got shot, he was up there like, oh my God, y'all see what happened? Like, he knew already, So for me, my piece was, no, the detective didn't kill my cousin. He shot him, he did, but God allowed whatever to transpire. And that allowed me to have peace with that, and to not, because it was around the time where Black Lives Matter started first. So I'm ready. I was out here ready. I'm ready to like riot, and God is like, nah, no, that's not what I need you to do. That's not what I need you. And there were so many opportunities and doors that opened up from that to be able to minister to his friends and people that was connected to him that I probably would have never had the opportunity to talk to had he not died. So, okay. All right. That's my little caveat. All right. Question number 11. Tell us of a difficult case you had. And of course, I know you can't, share names or anything like that, but you could talk about a difficult time that you had with the case, or, anything you're willing to
so
share.
I tried to think about like past cases, and I just, I'll start with this is like a hard case that I'm kind of dealing with right now, because it was just fresh on my mind, which is and it kind of lines up with the whole conversation that we've already had, which is one of my former students as a teacher is now in my group in the correctional facility. Yeah. And I knew him as a middle schooler. Again, I won't give too much detail about what school or, but that is hard.
Wow.
That is hard. And because that's why I have to have so much faith in the journey of transformation. And even just kind of like last week, like I saw like this is the thing, like having been my student while a teacher, like you already know, like your students become your kids for real from September to June. And I was with them all day. I'm self-contained, right? I'm teaching all 5 subjects. those students really became my children. So
Right.
to have a student in the correctional facility is hard, and I've never experienced that. It's 7 years later that I'm seeing him.
Wow.
Right. He was a young child when I met him. And so, but like I also on a regular in the correctional facility see young people I've served, not in a teacher capacity, but in a social work capacity. So
Right.
like just last week, the other night, like I encountered 5 young people that I have served. And I felt like it was aftercare. Like social workers, we call it aftercare, where they leave the agency and then like we continue to support them after they leave the agency. Like I felt like I was providing aftercare services, like because there was so many of them. And every time I see a young person that I counseled to try to avoid this, being incarcerated, and then I see you in there, it's definitely like a rough moment. But then we're also like, it's very strange because then we're happy to see each other, but like we're in here and like that is very hard. But so I actually have like 2 students in one group, but he's one of them, that my former middle school student. And so like that is, it's not too much detailed into his case, right? But that is something that I'm dealing with right now that's like deep, and I do need to like process that and resolve that, because but I also feel grateful because I'm kind of like getting the assignment, right? Like I'm being assigned to his life again, which I like didn't have the opportunity to do with Raheem, right? So like
Right.
I can now be his street social worker, right? And I'm talking to him in a way that I have so much more insight than I did at that time. Like I know so much more about how to really serve them properly. And so like I kind of feel grateful for that, but it's also disturbing because like did I do enough then? And but also school doesn't really serve that purpose. You come to school, you do your work, and after school the environment pulls on you.
Mm.
And that's like just that. But as
Did
I
he remember you?
Oh yeah, like me and him had a very very
Wow.
good relationship at that time. um so yeah, that's something I'm going through now, but I would also say I'm grateful that like, you know, if we're in the passenger seat of their car and I'm saying, hey, there's that wall right there. Yeah, we could go around it like this, like that. And they're like, nah, Miss Berry, like I got the I got the wheel, right, of life. I got the wheel, we good. Like, right, 90 miles an hour at a brick wall. Um, like the correctional facility, I was like trying to help you avoid the wall. And now we're like in here, but like I also am grateful the airbags didn't deploy because he's not dead. Like he is
Right.
alive and I'm reassigned to his life. And but it is kind of disturbing because I knew him
Yeah,
that.
I
Yeah.
completely understand.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
But it's
This
a
is where the
journey to
journaling, this is where the journaling comes
Yes,
in.
yeah. I feel personally attacked because yes, I need to get that girl. He just convicted me this morning about the journal. Okay, I'm clear. Journaling, counseling. I feel personally attacked. We gonna attack each other today, Diane. I'm clear. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, listen,
But
okay.
I also wanted to just say for this question is like, because I didn't want this whole thing to sound like depressing and terrible and traumatic.
Mhm.
Like I didn't want the profession to sound like that. So what is the best thing about social work is the success stories. There aren't as many, but the success stories, the when you see the harvest of the work, right? Which I'll talk about later, but like when you see the success, when you see light bulbs go off, when you see seeds being planted in them, that thing is magical. That thing is
Yeah.
magical when you have an impact on people's lives. And even if it doesn't come to fruition in front of you, it does come to fruition eventually. And so
Yeah.
that is the amazing thing about social work.
Yes.
So I
Yes.
didn't want it to all sound so
No,
depressing.
listen, no, it doesn't though. And I think even as an educator, as a social worker as well, I believe like the scripture that talks about like some plant seeds, some water, and God does the increase. In this field, you do what you do, and it's difficult to, like you said, not take those things personal and not to feel like, oh man, like I failed, I did this, I did that. Like that is hard. Like that is difficult, even as an educator, to feel like I've been working super hard with you to succeed and to get these grades and you're not you're not doing it. And it's like I can't take on that burden. You can't take on that full-on burden. Like whatever your assignment was,
In the
whatever you were
passenger seat.
yes, whatever you were designated to do, if you were the seed planter, if you were the waterer, it is only up to them to allow God to do the increase. You know, like, and I know for a fact that without preaching Jesus, you preach Jesus. Like, so it's because it's just in you. Like you know what I'm saying? Like you don't, that's not something you could really hide. So I do understand that. And I don't think that it is depressing at all. It is a reality for us to realize that that's where that boundary comes in, right? Like I can't take on this whole thing and say that I'm to blame, or there's like, you know, the chiropractor even talks about one of his more difficult cases where it was a lady that he felt like he didn't fully service her, and it wasn't that she just needed to be referred out, but it took time for him to unload all of that stuff on himself, to feel like, all right, I just did not have what she needed, and it's not that I didn't help her. I just need to refer her out for more services. So no, it didn't sound depressing. I said all that to say no, it didn't sound depressing. But thank you for that, for sharing that. You know, there are success stories, and sometimes you don't see them. And sometimes you may not even encounter that person after that moment, but just know that you've done your part and you fulfilled your duties. And that's the fulfillment that you just need to be okay with. All right. Number 12. What are some statistics we should know about New Jersey and social work?
So I had to research these in full transparency and write them down. So between 2016 and 2026, social work is expected to grow like the profession at 16%. It's like basically the fastest growing profession in the country. And I'm not surprised with that because COVID, I mean, like, and where we're going in this world, like social work and support, yeah. 83% of like, I guess, social workers. I don't know about if any data specialists. I don't know about the the group and
right. General statistics.
Exactly. Generally speaking, 83% of social workers are female. That is an issue. Okay. I'm just saying any males that are working, especially in who we serve, Black males are very, very much needed and valued. And like that number shouldn't be that high, like females, 83%. And then I just took some data like from different populations because I knew we'd be talking about that. So there are 1.2 million high school dropouts, right? So I was a school social worker for alternative ed. So that like that number is important. We have the highest incarceration rate in the world. I think we kind of already know that. 1 out of 4 people in the world have mental disorders. DCPMP monitors 3.2 million children in the United States. And because I knew we were going to ask this, which is why people take kids, right? But I'm just saying there are 3.6 million referrals to DCPMP. Now, I don't know if that's per year. I didn't get that far. Right. But 3.6 million referrals to DCPMP. And then
you know what? That's also the petty referrals.
I thought about that too. Like I thought about that too.
Those also the petty referrals.
It's probably 4 million. Now we're thinking because it's 3.2 million they monitor and 3.6 they get referrals. So either unfounded, petty. Some of them are unfounded. Some of them weren't petty but unfounded. But yeah, that's your statistics. Question number 12.
Wow! Oh my gosh, those numbers. Oh. And back to the men thing, I think again a misconception because of I noticed that the fields that involve more nurturing things are predominantly women, right? I actually have an interview with a male nurse, and I'm pretty sure he's also going to talk about how like there are some to none, like male nurses.
Mm-hmm.
And then most of the time when you see a male nurse, you think he's a doctor, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because
Wow.
seriously,
Mm-hmm.
because I know, like, is this a doctor? Like,
Mm-hmm.
no, he's a nurse. Oh, okay. But most of the more nurturing type of careers, a lot of women are involved in, and I think the education field is just now picking up on like the male educators. But we have a lot of female educators, a lot of female educators. So I'm honestly not surprised
Yeah.
at that number for social.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Question number 13. We are almost at the end. What would you say is the hardest thing of your work? Or like what is the hardest thing about your work?
So I would say like it is a blessing. I'll start strength based. Like it is a blessing when you do get to see the harvest, right? And God often like gives me like a glimpse at harvest when I'm feeling a little burnt out. And I'm like, look, I need to see something because like this is not working out. So like I need to see something. And then like the kid will like send me a selfie at work or like, send me their diploma or college degree. Like, like it will just come through my phone like right when I need harvest. So I will say that that's like the blessing when the work gets hard. It's because I'm getting low on witnessing harvest. And so like I get hooked up though. Like God definitely hooks me up with watching getting the harvest. But I would say that watching the transformation is hard because I have to watch your ups and downs. I have to remain in the passenger seat when we hit the wall together.
Wow.
Right? I'm gonna hit the wall with you. I'm not jumping out of this car right before we hit the wall. Like I'm gonna hit the wall with you. But that's hard when you like see someone figuratively, right? Symbolically bleeding out, right?
Right.
Because you just hit the wall that like we had so many conversations about trying to avoid, right? So like that's hard to watch somebody you care about, you know, go through this journey of transformation.
Yeah.
Right? And I would also say the last piece is just like when time is up on assignment, time's up. And that part's a lot of times depending on the setting, right? Now, if you're a school social worker, even depending on it's not really, a school social worker is more predictable, right? It's not even totally predictable because like you said, the student earlier, she moved to another school, time's up. If you're not continuing to mentor her. But like as school social worker from September to June, I have these kids, right? But like in the streets, in a correctional facility, in a group home, in shelters, the assignment is now. And you are assigned to that person's life right now, and it could be for the next hour, and you never see that person again. It could be breaking up this fight, and I just met you 3 minutes ago, right? Like, I'm just saying, like, I've had to build rapport real quick, but like, it's the time is now, and I have to go hard in this moment because it catches you off guard when the assignment is up. Still, even now, like even if I do go hard and I know this concept, it's like I come back to work, wherever the work is, right? And you're gone. I'll never get used to that. Like, and gone for many, many different reasons, right? Could have transitioned, could have gotten kicked out of wherever they were, could have gotten a disciplinary charge and went to lockup, right? There's like depending on the setting, but in social work, like you gotta go hard, and when time's up, and I'll probably never get used to that. When the moment comes that's like, yeah, assignment was done. Like word. And then there's some people that it's done and then it comes back around. Again though, following professional boundaries, because like for inmates that leave the facility, I'm not allowed to keep in touch with them. So the kid that I've known for 10 years, I was allowed to keep in touch with them for 10 years. Whereas like other people, I'm not allowed to. So I do follow professional boundaries. Like all this stuff that we're talking about, I am very serious about boundaries and ethical obligations. I don't give money. I don't drive people in my car. Personal phone number. Like I was trained well. And so I do follow professional boundaries. I go hard though, within the boundaries that are set for me.
Right. That's good though. That's good.
So even though assignment is up, it doesn't mean I go try to find them.
Right.
Assignment was up. God said that's done. and that's it, so.
Right. And we talked about that earlier, right? Knowing
Trying to extend
seasons,
the season.
right. Knowing that. Yeah. And I think that's a perfect like profession to be able to even practice that like naturally so we can apply it like spiritually, right? Yeah. Okay. Question number 14. What would you say to someone who think social workers only break up families? I mentioned this statement earlier because it is believe it or not, it is a statement that I've heard more than one time, probably more than 3 times from different people. So what would you say to someone who feels like, and obviously this is coming from like the DCP aspect of it, I guess, that social workers only break up families?
Yeah. So I would say that like this conversation in itself definitely dispelled that myth. Like a social worker is not only working for DIFUS, right? A social worker can do so many things. But let's go into DIFUS land, right? Mm-hmm. And we're going to go into DIFUS land. Let's talk about the workers that are child welfare workers. So number one is they weren't always social workers. And I actually just learned this earlier talking to a friend of mine who about this interview, and she's a social worker, and she said there was like so I don't know a lot of information about it, but she said that there was a lawsuit that like I guess a child died, and there was a lawsuit at some point that made it required for DCP&P workers to have a master's in social work. Maybe it was a bachelor's, but to have credentials. Right. And so sorry. Joey D, Essex County. He calls me like scam likely all the time. He calls me every Sunday. But so yeah, they haven't always been social workers. Sometimes they just, had a high school diploma, wanted to be a child welfare worker, applied and became one. So that whole like social workers take your kids, they weren't always social workers, just to be clear. So then number 2, in my experience, there is a lot of pre-intervention work before they take kids from the house. So like if a call goes forth or whatever, right? They come, they investigate, they either find it substantiated or not substantiated, right? Mm-hmm. Let's say it is substantiated. They oftentimes, if the child is not in imminent danger, they will have the parent do, substance abuse treatment and drug like counseling or anger management or like whatever type of treatment the parent does need. Parenting classes. Sometimes it's just, I don't know how to discipline my child, right? Like he's wailing and I just like, and I'm stressed, right? I'm stressed. I'm working 2 jobs. And he just won't sit down. Like, so I try to make him sit down. I mean, sometimes it's just parenting skills. Right. A parenting class, they need help like that. So there's a lot of pre-intervention work that goes into it before they just take the child. So when they come in and they investigate, they don't just say, okay, pack your stuff, Johnny, let's go. It's not like that. Mm-hmm. And so pre-intervention work. Then let's say the pre-intervention work was an issue, right? And there was non-compliance, parent is not stepping up to what they need to do, right? Then they try to find next of kin. So they do try to place you with a grandparent, an aunt, an uncle, a cousin, a brother. They even out of state. So I was working for a group home. So all those kids, it was DCP&P basically run, and 14 to 21 years old. And like if they needed placement, they would get placed like even out of state. Oh, you have an aunt in North Carolina? Does the aunt have a job? Do they have a bedroom? Are they willing to take you? Yes. Send them to the aunt in North Carolina. So like they do try to keep you with family members before like just putting you in like a foster home or in a group home. And then the last piece that I just had to mention in this question, like if anyone has seen the documentary on Netflix about Gabriel Fernandez. Have you seen that? Girl? You need to see that.
It's on Netflix.
Yes. Gabriel was like 6 episodes, and like it was basically a little 8-year-old boy who was like savagely abused. I mean, really, really terribly abused for years and years and years. And his parents eventually killed him. And the thing about that story that struck me was they brought the DIFUS workers to charges because they were falsifying paperwork. They weren't doing house visits like they were supposed to. They knew there was an issue and didn't report it the way they should have. The teacher had called DIFUS a couple times. Like the kid was screaming for help. The kid was telling adults in their life, right? Like I tell my clients that like everything that we talk about stays between you and me, unless you talk about harm. Are you going to do you want to kill yourself, harm yourself? Is someone hurting you, or are you going to go harm someone else? Not even ask, because I'm not law enforcement. So I've heard murder confessions, but I'm not law enforcement, and legally I'm not obligated to report that. It happened in the past. But if you are going to go kill someone, don't tell me, because I have to report. And I'm very clear, even as a teacher, when I used to do journals in my 4th grade class, ELA, look, what is said in this journal stays here between me and you, unless these 3 things. Gabriel Fernandez, and then I would find that if kids still told me, it's because they wanted it to be reported.
Right. They want help.
Gabriel Fernandez wanted to get out of that house. And he was screaming for help, and he was telling adults. He would come into school with like marks all over his face. I mean, the documentary is really like crazy.
Say it again. Say the name again.
Gabriel Fernandez. Yeah. And so like kids tell you when they wish you would remove them. Kids will tell a DIFUS worker because they want to be removed, because it's hell on earth in that house, and a foster home. Now, granted, there's issues with foster homes. We don't need to get into all that. But, because sometimes they land in a foster home that abuses them as well.
Yeah.
But sometimes, like, at the end of the day, like, all the things I've already said about this question, but at the end of the day, some kids need to be removed.
Yeah. And then you also, as a social worker, being able to identify the difference from a child that's just like, my parents not letting me do what I want to do, so I want to leave, versus being like, I legitimately need help. Like, something is going on here. My parents need help, and it's not helping with me being here. Like, being able to distinguish those 2 things, because reality is that you do have children that, again, is petty. Yeah. And they like, my mother took my phone away. I'm calling DIFUS. Yeah. Like, that's like the main thing you hear in schools now. I'm calling DIFUS.
And then also like parents lying when the investigator comes, right? Mm-hmm. So I've heard of that, because I haven't had to call many times in my career. Thank God. It's like, I think maybe 3. And I remember all 3, and I have 20 years experience. So like, when the investigator goes there, right? Because the kid could have told me one thing, and then the investigator goes, and like the parents put on a show.
Right. They make sure the house is clean. They make sure everybody's dressed. Everybody's sitting on the couch lined up. Dinner's in the oven.
Yeah. And then the kid gets intimidated, and it's like, no, my mommy is perfect, right? So like, there's that. Yeah, and so I would say that, like you said, the worker has to have training and discernment mixed, right? To be able to tell like when this is an issue. And I would hate to be a DIFUS worker, because 1, removing kids probably isn't fun, but 2, God forbid you have Gabriel Fernandez. Like, those social workers were on trial, and I thought that was great. Yeah, put them on trial, because nobody protected that kid. Like, right. You're falsifying paperwork. You haven't done a house visit for 3 months. Like, that kid, they're tying him up and burning him with cigarettes and all this other stuff. Like, a lot of adults were to blame for his death. So wow. I'm not like pro taking kids away, but I do want to just bring the reality that like sometimes if we really do think about it, there are some kids that don't need to be there.
Right. And like you said, spelling even just that idea that it's not like, oh, somebody gets a call, I'm going over to take the kids.
Right. No.
Like there's
so many more steps.
Yeah, there are steps that go before that. And I mean, even I know that. And I realized that even in, again, not disclosing any names, but people that I've talked to who actually has made that statement has also had their own discrepancies with DIFAS. You know, if it was them as a child or if it was their own case. So from I realized that we formulate these ideas and misconceptions about things because of what we've experienced. And it's just like, yeah, you know, like I may, you know, if I decide, God willing, if this is the field that I go into, I may end up being the hated person in the room because of what you feel like the field is. But this is why we do this platform, as well as, you know, just having people to express what it really is and what is really done. Like, and throughout this whole episode, you have talked about like what a social worker is and what a social worker isn't, and what your job is, and how many uh, different aspects of it. So I hope and pray that people watching this see, and no, let me say this disclaimer: everyone is not an Alia Berry. Everyone is not that. Okay, and this is why we had in that movie, as Alia just said, social workers on trial. So I understand that facet of it as well. But don't, like, you know, how they say, like, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Yeah, like don't do that, right? Like being able to distinguish and, like you said, have discernment to understand that some people are in the field for the money. Some people don't have a passion for it, and it's unfortunate, but don't just have this mindset that like that is the only thing that social workers do. You have Alia Berries out here that's doing the business, that's getting the job done, and that has given us so much information. This is not my closing because we have one more question. Okay. Question number 15.
Wait, but I will just say,
go ahead.
Like that, it also does get whatever social worker you're about to judge that is attached to a system, right? Get to know the social worker. Because if we put this stigma on social workers that are attached to systems that we have encountered and systems that have failed us, systems that have hurt us, right? DIFAS has hurt many people.
Yeah.
Right? Prison, the prison social worker. What? Like, I've had to prove that, like, I am not them. And let me prove it to you. Right? Because or so yeah, and she gonna tell parole that I said blah blah blah, right? Like, or I'm not gonna open up to her. She's gonna make me feel like it's treatment. My groups do not feel like treatment, okay? Just say that, right? Like they don't even feel doctor-ish, right? But I got letters behind my name and I am doing clinical work in here. It doesn't feel like that, but so I say that to say that anybody that's watching is like, get to know the social worker that's attached to the system and see if how they're coming, and then see whether they are the DIFAS social worker that they usually are, or if they are some, you know, somebody different. So yeah.
So question number 15. Right, we're here at the end finally.
But this has been fun.
Like, yes. I don't even know how long I'll see in a minute. But what would you say to someone who wants to get into this field?
No names mentioned. This whole thing was for you, girl. I hope other people are inspired, but this one was for you. So,
oh my God.
So number one is pick your population. Okay. Who do you want to serve? That is number one. Who do you want to serve? And I've talked about a lot of different populations in this conversation. Is it girls? Is it boys? Is it men, women, incarcerated, AIDS, homeless, shelter? Is it, I want to do legislative work with Congress, right? Because laws need to be passed by social workers as well. So pick your population. Number two, then volunteer in a variety of settings where that population is. So let's say it was homeless, right? Well, do I want to work with Covenant House, that's 18 to 21? Do I want to work in Apostle House, which is mothers and children? Do I want to work in Fulton Street, which is men? Or do I want to do Bridges Outreach under the bridge on 21? Right? So if I pick homeless, then let me go volunteer at these different settings to figure out where in homeless do I really want to serve, right? Pick a setting. Do I want to do shelter? Do I want to do street outreach? Do I want to do homeless in schools?
Mm-hmm.
Do I want to do YMCA, right? Like with all the floors of homeless people. Like, so pick a setting and then get credentials for that setting. So like Bridges Outreach doesn't need an LCSW, right? A Covenant House maybe not need an LCSW, but maybe somewhere else a different setting would need. And like YMCA, certain positions in the YMCA probably would need an LSW, right? So go get the credential that's going to pay your bills.
Right, back to that point.
Okay, because after you volunteer, if we're really looking to make a switch professionally, I need something that can pay my bills. Now, that's not to say you don't drop though, because like I said, when I left the district, I took a $15,000 pay cut and went to school full time and worked full time. Yeah, like there was a pay cut there, but then I still went to school, got my credentials up, and then got back to teaching salary, but doing social work. Like,
right.
So there was that though, and that is a part of this journey. So,
Right.
but get the credentials to pay your bills, and then pursue supervision. Always have supervision, people that are pouring into you and teaching you and supervising your work. You cannot do this work alone. You cannot do this work rogue, where you're not bouncing it off anybody, that you're untrained and just rogue. And then you said earlier, therapy, right? Your own counseling, your own healing. You need to heal from your own trauma, maybe not in order to be a social worker, but concurrent, right? Simultaneously working on yourself as you're serving others, and continue to maintain self-care as you work. But that's kind of the process, is like pick a population, volunteer at different settings, pick a setting, get credentials that match that setting.
There it is. All of the information in this video was a lot, but it was great. It was a great a lot. It wasn't like a lot, like overwhelming. It was so, I feel like just with this video alone, you have brought, like you shined light on a field that I believe is darkness to so many people. Like we don't know. And just in the first two questions alone, the light was like bing, like my ring light right now, like bright, like real bright, blinding. Because that it was information that I didn't know. I had no idea about, and I'm pretty sure a lot of people did not know. So, I hope and pray you guys that watching this, even if it's not a field that you want to get into, but now you have a different level of respect. I believe knowledge brings awareness, and awareness brings a level of respect that you can have for people, knowing that all the work that is done in this field. Alia, is there anything else you have to say?
No, just I'll say that you need to get in your closet. Because I told you before we press record, I'm always trying to recruit soldiers for the Army. I'm always trying to do that. So if this is a commercial just for you.
She didn't want to wait till after we ended this.
And I put it on the record, girl. And anyone who, like you said, just the audience that has been hurt by social workers. Like, definitely, it is not all of us. And, give the social workers that you come in contact with, like, give them the benefit of the doubt if you've been hurt by social workers in the past. So,
yeah. Yes. So I can say ouch and amen to this whole video. But thank you all for watching. This was an amazing episode. I'm really excited about this. And again, I pray that you are blessed. But remember, as I always say, make sure that you are living in purpose on purpose. Bye.